it's actually the quality of the founder is determined by what kind of team he's able to put on the ground that is executing and that has success.
Welcome back to 40-Minute Mentor, the podcast on a mission to raise aspirations and inspire the next generation of category-defining founders, all in just 40 minutes. Today, we're joined by Thomas Plantenga, CEO of popular secondhand marketplace Vinted. What started as a small Lithuanian startup in 2008 has evolved into a thriving European business with millions of users all around the world, over 2,000 people at their HQ in Lithuania and across European offices, and a brand that has grown far beyond a marketplace for pre-loved clothing and home items. Thomas joined Vinted in 2016 as a consultant before rising to the role of Chief Strategy Officer, co-CEO, and finally Group CEO in 2017, taking the business from running on mere months of cash flow to a $5 billion valuation in 2021. More recently, Vinted made more startup news by announcing the launch of its dedicated investment arm, looking to back the next generation of startups to accelerate re-commerce with checks from $500K to $10 million for Series A to C companies. I can't wait to dig into his impressive journey scaling Lithuania's first ever tech unicorn and find out more about what the future holds for Vinted.
A big warm welcome, Thomas. Thank you so much for joining us on 40-Minute Mentor. How are you today?
I'm doing good.
Amazing. Well, that's just what we like to hear. And I cannot wait to dig into your story. Big fan of Vinted, as I'm sure many of our listeners will be too. So can't wait to dig into your story. But before we start, we always like to warm you up with some quick fire questions. So please finish the following sentences after me. The first one, the moment that defined my career was when?
I think when my friend asked me, hey, Thomas, do you want to join and learn how to build websites? Because then we can build our own internet companies and kitesurf whenever we want. And I was like, okay, sounds like a pretty good plan. And I learned how to go together with him. And we started our first company, which was called We Build Websites, because we were building websites. And then we started another company together called Book a Boat, because it was software to book boats. So I think that's the biggest one. Second one is obviously when he invited me to come over to Vilnius to help out a little bit. And I sticked around for a while.
And the rest is history. I love it. Thank you. I love how it stems from wanting to do a hobby and a sport. And then all of a sudden, here you are running Vinted. Incredible.
Yeah.
The biggest lesson I've learned about leadership is?
Yeah, I think that I get reminded about this constantly is that you need to lead with transparency and with empathy. I think it's, if you have these two things, you save yourself so much trouble and you make life so much easier for everybody around you. I think I come from a culture and from the Netherlands where directness is being seen as a virtue, and Lithuanians take that one level further. And I think that makes things just very productive. But if you are direct in what you tell people, I think it's very important to stay empathic to how somebody feels around this. And I think in many cultures, people sugarcoat too much and therefore there's too much noise on the line. And I think as a leader, I think creating noise on the line is just inefficiency that amplifies throughout your organization. So I think the cultural habits of being direct, yet being empathic, I think is something that is important.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think it's often the trait that we see in the best founders we work with. They're able to be incredibly clear and have real clarity and vision and communicate in a really clear way, but they're also very people focused and, really care about the individuals. Love that. A skill I wish I had mastered earlier in my career is?
It's actually not how I look at things, because I don't think that you have like 4 or 5 skills that kind of like make you successful. I think, and thus I don't have a specific point in my career where like, oh, now I learned this, and that is like, now I learned how to program in VBA Excel, or that's how I learned how to program this language, or how to do these kind of things. What I'm very happy of that I've learned very early on in my career is that, let's say, this sense that I consistently need to learn to do things better, whether it's like analyzing results, whether it's like presenting results, whether it is critiquing, giving feedback, or whatever it is. So I thought long about it, but there's nothing that I would really like zoom in on, like, oh, wow, I wish it was that I did that because this helped me so much. There are so many of these little elements that constantly all come together. So I think I'm just very happy that since the beginning, I was very focused on learning certain things. And then when you learn something, that you focus on becoming good at something and then moving on. So it's not one thing, it's not one skill. You constantly focus on something to learn that and then move on and learn the next thing. I think that's the main thing.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you very much. A final quick fire question. If you could change one thing about how companies build teams, what would it be?
Yeah. So I think that in many organizations and also sometimes in Vinted, you start with, in building a team, you start with a standard approach around what kind of skills you need, and you start working towards a solution. And I think every company have different ways of standardized team building. But I think that in all these processes, always people make quite a lot of assumptions about what they need to solve, what they are solving for, and thus what kind of the solution needs to be. And what you see is that they usually try to reuse a lot of knowledge from previous projects, which is good. But what I usually see is, and I see it in our organization as well, is that from taking that other knowledge, usually that's based on certain assumptions that certain things are constant or the same. So I would always have advised to, in every problem that you're solving or every team that you're building around a problem, to really make sure that you check all the fundamental knowledge around it, what is really, really true and what is an assumption, to make sure that you can later adjust if some of these assumptions are not true. So I think being too rigid on assumptions and not quick enough learning that an assumption is not true in any problem that you solve, whether it's building of a team or building of a product or a feature, whatever it is.
Yeah, really, really well said. Thank you. Well, we're going to dive into all things vintage shortly. But before we get there, I always like to find out a bit about our guests' upbringing because it often, has a direct sort of path, of course, to the leader that you are today. So do you mind sharing a bit more about that and perhaps what your early career aspirations were?
So I grew up in a tiny village, like somewhere between 5,000, 8,000 people, literally small village in the Netherlands, in the center of the country. My mother was a nurse and later started teaching nursing. And my dad was a scientist working on biofuels and catalyzers. So a family of 5, brother and sister, both younger. And it was a very warm family. So very empathic parents, very loving, very stable, very structured, and a culture in which I was raised where it was very clear that it is important that you do your chores. It's important that you work hard, that you do well at school, but also a place that was just very loving. Like my parents, until this day, they're like incredibly loving people. They come over, visit Vilnius, and then they're so excited to be here with me. So very loving family, very caring and hardworking, I think. And very simple and said like a small village, nothing too special about it, quite regular. So as I grew up, my aspirations of working kind of changed. I think I didn't had an enormous view on what you could do when you were working. I just saw my dad leaving in a suit. He would fly over the world to kind of like help implement catalysts in refineries and stuff like that. So when I was a really young kid, I wanted to be like my dad and like have a suit and fly around the world. And I didn't have any clue what that actually meant. When I chose my studies, I chose that because my dad selected a couple of universities and a couple of studies to go look at, because we made a deal. The advice of my counsel at your high school helps you decide on what to do. They let you do a test, and out of the test came that it was very clear that I should join the Marines or the Commandos, because I really liked sports and had a high amplitude for mathematics. So I was like, okay, something like that, let's do that then. And my dad said, well, you know what? You go and organize the viewing days at the army, and I will arrange some technical universities because, you scored high on physics and chemistry. And so let's say that. So my dad organized a visit at physics, chemistry, and bioengineering and mechanical engineering. So 2 in Eindhoven, 2 in Delft. So obviously I didn't arrange anything to go to the army days because, I was just playing hockey and skating and stuff like that. And my dad took me to the university days, and I thought it was all kind of cool. I thought, you know what, my dad's a smart guy. To me, potato, whether I'm going to do physics or this, let's just go do for this. It kind of sounds good. So I started studying that, realized I was kind of a mediocre kind of physicist / bioengineer person, yet I was quite attracted to the cardiovascular, the fluid dynamics, physics side of it. So I did my master's in that, enjoyed the research. So I really had luck with my professors and assistant professors who guided me through my master's, my internships, and my last research. And I actually thought like, okay, I'm gonna be a scientist. My dad was a scientist, and that was kind of kind of a logical choice. But then in my last research, I was in a basement and I practically was working in a basement with a Chinese guy, very friendly guy. And it was just us in the basement for kind of like 9 months. And I felt like, wow, I like science. It's a lot of beautiful problems to solve and it's very useful. But like this basement thing is kind of it's kind of tough. And so I went surfing for a year to make up my mind. And then I never went back to the basement, not because I didn't like the science, but because my friend called me and he said like, hey, you were programming these mathematical models for your research. I've learned how to program in PHP. It's a computer language. We can build websites. We can sell these websites. And then we can go kite surfing when the weather is good. And we can work and make money when it's not. And maybe we can build our own products. And I thought like, you know what? I really like the guy. I always have fun surfing with him and we're good, very good friends. So why don't we do it? So he sent me over all these tutorials and we learned how to code. And that's how I then again learned I'm kind of an absolute mediocre coder, but I was kind of like a good partner to my friend in helping up, starting up these businesses. And I really enjoyed it. So then I never went back to research. Till this day is something that itches because I think it's very, very interesting. So practically I mean, life just happened and I listened to people around me and I was just up for doing things. And I think that shaped my career very much. Like consistently across my career, I kind of had success because somebody else needed to help out. And whether it was with Vinted, whether it was with Sell It, where Fabrice asked me, or whether it was in any other situation. So I think, look, I didn't really have a career plan. I just took it year by year, month by month, and tried to just be useful and try to figure out what I'm good at and be helpful in that way. I think that's how it all happened.
Paying it forward and saying yes to things, it's amazing how doors can open off the back of that and just having that sort of growth mindset and willingness to help out. I guess it's probably a good segue to talk about joining Vinted because I read that you actually joined as a turnaround consultant. So do you mind sharing a bit more about the context of Vinted's position back then, sort of how you ended up there and how you ultimately went about sort of stabilizing the business?
I didn't join as a turnaround consultant. I just joined to help out a little bit because it was not clear that the turnaround was needed. So before that, I was working with Fabrice and I joined one of his incubation companies, Sell It, who was a mobile-only classifieds in the US. And before that, I was working at OLX because Fabrice founded that. He saw what I was doing there. He asked me to join. With Sell It, I thought, okay, it's cool. I'm going to learn Fabrice. He had like this beautiful incubation house in the Dominican Republic. He said, we can kite surf together and we can incubate companies. If you want to join? I was like, I mean, this sounds amazing. So let's do it. So we started that. That went well. It merged with Wallapop and Wallapop was funded by Axel and Insight, which are also investors in Vinted. And I was working there together with Matthias, who was an ex-Insight investor who joined the portfolio company Wallapop. And we practically were sitting next to each other and we were together with Belen, we were kind of like this tech team of 3 people constantly solving all kinds of problems and doing all kinds of things. So we went through this enormous ups and downs. At Wallapop was really tough. But when you go through tough moments together, you kind of bond. So then in the end, Wallapop sold to Letgo, their US venture. And that meant that both me and Matthias were out of a job because we were very much needed for the US, but not so much needed afterwards. And then Matthias was very closely related to LOD, who was at Insight Ventures. And they talked about like, it's not going well with Vinted. And Matthias kind of said like, well, I think you should talk to Thomas. He did some good stuff at Wallapop and also from the board. Elodie heard like, okay, Thomas did some good things. So Elodie then had a breakfast with me and she tried to convince me to go and help out this company in Lithuania. I just worked like, just for context, I just worked kind of like 2 years or 1.5 years, like nonstop, right? This was one of the most intense, very intense period. So I finally kind of like had nothing to do. I was like, I'm not going to go like throw myself into a struggling company in Lithuania. I live now in New York. I work together with Fabrice and Fabrice knows like all these incredibly talented people in New York. Like, why would I go to Lithuania? So she invited me again under different circumstances. She said she had something else for me, but again, started talking about Vinted. And I was like, okay, you want me so much to look at it. I'll have a call with the founders. And I thought like, I'll take a call, be polite and give them some advice. And then I move on. But I met Montos and Justus and Vaidas on the call, and they were sharing their stories about Lithuania, being liberated from the Soviet Union, how they built their businesses, how they were in trouble now. They showed the numbers and became clear that they're really in trouble. And I got intrigued. I got intrigued by the people because I felt like they are like wonderful people really working hard to build something in a place where it's hard to build something and not ever has anything been built from here. I felt that they had a very difficult problem. So then again, when they asked, I thought like, okay, you know what? I'll just come and help out. And I promised to come over for 5 weeks. And that's how I ended up there. And then when I came there, pretty quickly it became clear that things were much worse than what I thought. Like we pretty soon realized like, okay, we actually have like 9 to 12 months of runway. Depends a little bit on how we're gonna cut. And we have a real problem because our proposition is less attractive than anybody else. We're losing users every month. It's kind of a free fall at the moment, and we need to find a way out. So that was my first days of arriving there, realizing that, and that's where it started.
Wow, what a story. I mean, it's incredible to think. I think Vinted was almost running out of cash, and then now is a $5 billion plus valuation. It's an amazing story. So tell us a bit about the shift that had to happen and kind of what you did in those early days to kind of turn the business around. And I'd love to know that moment where you went, we're really on something here. Like, tell us a bit more about that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so I think one of the key things that we changed was that I looked at practically, what is the proposition of all our competitors? What are they asking in terms of cost? What are they adding as value and how quick you sell and stuff like that? And how does it compare? And then it became pretty clear that we're asking more than anybody else and that we're delivering less than anybody else. So for every euro you give us, you get less back than you give it to somebody else. So first step was, okay, our current proposition is losing because it is less valuable and it costs more. So then it was pretty obvious, like, okay, let's bring the value up and bring the cost down for our users. So bring the cost down, meaning lower cost structure in terms of fees, and bring the value up is letting people sell faster, having less scam and stuff like that, because that was obviously the other thing. So then when that was clear, that was the first aha moment for me. Then it was like, okay, second one was like, okay, so the person who's actually getting value out of this is the buyer, because they get safety of the escrow, they get easy buying, cheap shipping, all that kind of stuff. So we let that person pay for it. Then initial idea was like, okay, we're gonna make the fee structure so low that we're kind of like on the transactional basis, we're break even. Later we'll have some optimizations that will make more money out of it, but we start kind of break even. And then we make money out of advertising, value-added service, and other stuff. And in that way, we can be long-term the most attractive proposition. But then Modestas, our product manager, was kind of leading the efforts on like this turnaround together with me. He kind of had a little bit of a different idea. He said like, well, I want to have some safety. So he built in some safety margins. So then we created that fee structure on that side, and we had some tests running on that. We saw that the price elasticity showed that if you lower that price, then you get like ample of growth out of it. And when I saw those results, that was another moment like, okay, this can actually really work. And then we implemented it and we saw that that went as the tests predicted, which was then again like a validation point. It's like, okay, again, this seems to be on the right track. Then I knew we need to get marketing working. And then we saw the first television campaigns go live and we saw that had the right effect. Then I kind of knew like, okay, it's not going to fail, because the other elements were much less risky, right? I knew we needed to cut costs dramatically, but like a super simple thing. You need to keep the people that are necessary and let go of people that are less necessary, even though they're doing a great job. It's very hard emotionally, but intellectually, there's low risk to it. And we need to restructure to get an organization that's very focused around the OKRs that actually matter and that you do that all well. But I knew that that's kind of like hygiene's basics. So when I saw, let's say, these A/B tests, I saw the actual results after, I saw the television campaigns going live, then I knew like, okay, this is on the right track. We're going to get there. The only question was like, what was then open? Like, is this going to be like marginal success of like a reasonable company that's going to be worth a few hundred millions and that can hold up its spends and that like in the end will give some money back to investors? Not amazing, but at least it's not like a disaster and it's some useful product that sells some secondhand stuff. To be honest, I was really in his first 1.5 years, I was really in the mode of like, we need to optimize as much as possible to make it a viable company, especially in France. And if that works, then we have a shot of making something big. So I think along the way, what I described is, let's say, the first 6 months, somewhere February 2017, like the haha moment that give you confirmation, okay, this is gonna go. But then like every 6 months, you get more proof points around what you can do better, how it can be bigger. And like every time you see practically that your probability of creating something bigger becomes bigger and more likely, and you start to see more and more opportunities, which goes very gradually. Here at Vinted, people say like, we have a great vision with this company about long-term and where we're gonna go, but I'm not like kind of a visionary person. Like I very much like see, let's say, a couple steps ahead and like think a little bit like a few years, like, okay, it's logical we built this. It's not like I'm envisioning a completely new world where everything works differently. So also my insights along the way on how we can make this bigger and can grow this further just come gradually as me and my team are discussing what to do. It's not that these insights just come from me or something like that. It's kind of like a gradual process where we get more information, we see things, somebody has an idea, we challenge the ideas, the things come up.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're being very humble, but it also shows that you, as a leader, are the sort of person that can bring people into the room and take their ideas and bring them together to achieve what you've achieved.
This is not humbleness. This is really reality. Like also, if you look at the execution of Vinted and what we're doing, like many of the things that we're doing, I have no experience in, and it's mostly because we have the right people around us who understand what we're doing and then bring in specialized knowledge about payments, about shipping, about advertising. Like it's not humbleness; it's really reality.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's something we're going to come on to actually to talk about building growing teams, because clearly you brought together some exceptional people to help you achieve the success that you have, which in itself is incredible. But I just wanted to touch upon, clearly you sort of went from this difficult period and you obviously sort of saw the path and took it on this journey, you became the CEO. I'd love to know what have been the biggest leadership lessons you've learned along that incredible growth journey. What are the things that stick out to you that you would want to share with our listeners, many of whom are founders looking to try and replicate and build the next version of Vinted or similar scale?
Let's just take my recent lesson. So I can sometimes lose my nerves, like I can get angry. And what I learned over the last, let's say, and I think we had more of that in difficult moments over the last well, not more and more of the last 12 years. I just had that. And when you are a small company with very trusted people around you, like they can take it from you and it's like, okay, Thomas is getting a bit angry right now and we'll let him cool down and we'll come back and it will be okay. Mostly because they're able to deal with that in a good way. And what I've learned, I think, over the last period of time is that, as the company becomes bigger, it's like at the beginning, it was kind of like people could live with it because it was a small team. But as you get bigger, your voice also becomes heavier and it becomes way more counterproductive. So sometimes I could still get angry. And my team told me, like, Thomas, it really has to stop because people are just shaking and it's not working and it's counterproductive. It goes the other way. So I had like this kind of moment that I really thought about it, like, okay, I had my like yearly performance review practically where I asked from my peers in my team, like, okay, what are you doing? And this was clearly one of the things I wanted to see change in. So I talked with several people about it and I realized like, okay, what's happening is that in these moments, I take this, building this company, I take it very personally. Over the last 9 years, much of my personality blended over into this company. And if things go wrong, I take it personally and I take it emotionally. And then I have that. Yet, I really need to be able to stay calm and not take it personally because this is nonsense. I don't think, I can think more clearly if I don't do it. So I really need to pull my ego out of this company and pull my ego out of these situations when things are difficult or things are going wrong and I'm angry about that it's going wrong. And I should learn how to constrain that and how to how to pull my ego and myself out of this company in those moments. And I think that has been a big lesson to me and it's working better. I still get pissed sometimes, but I control it much better. And therefore, I'm a much more reasonable person, and therefore, I'm a better boss, I think. So my team highlighted this to me, and I have like great people in my team who are emotionally more mature than me, like Adam and Mauricio. These people are further in life. They have families. They have had many C-level roles in their lives, and they're obviously more mature people than me. And they help me with this. And then, so for me to go through that with them, get that clear for myself, look at myself and think, okay, this is something that needs to change. It's pathetic. Let's fix it. That helped me, I think. And that's been one of my latest journeys. So I shared that with the company as one of my improvement points, and I'm working on it. And I think it's going pretty well. Not perfect, but much better than 2 years ago.
I really appreciate your candor, and I'm sure others listening to will be able to resonate with that. It's really hard. When it's your baby, you do take things personally, and I think it's good to talk about these things, but also show that
Yeah,
that development has helped you become a better boss and no doubt an even better company and culture.
exactly. And I think like that you take things personally is not specifically bad. Like I think that's one of the reasons why I worked night and day for years to get this done and to work on this, which is very productive. It's also a bit pathetic because, your life is suffering in many other ways. So it's not balanced at all. But for me, this worked out. I have a fantastic social life and family and everybody. So it's okay. I had a lot of elasticity on these relationships. So there are good things to it, but like there are also dark elements on it. And I think these dark elements, the older you become, the better you're probably able to identify them. And it's more productive if you recognize those dark elements to it. It's better for the people around you. So
Yeah, and I think there's a leadership lesson there, just for all of our listeners around the importance of being self-aware, or even if we're not self-aware, making sure you're asking people you trust and value or your peers for their input to improve. I think it's a really important thing. It's a perfect segue to talking about culture and hiring. It's a particular topic of favor for me because I'm a headhunter, and you obviously have 2,000 people spread across multiple European offices. So I'd love to hear a bit about your own approach to hiring and how that's evolved as Vinted has scaled over the years.
yeah, so hiring in this organization, and there are we have a protocol that practically ensures that we vet people very strongly. And then we have, let's say, what we call a tryout period where we ask people to come and work with us. We're not doing this to get work out of you. We're checking if you're able to do something that could be useful to us. The problem that we're giving you, we're already solved it. So like it's not that we're extracting work out of you. It is actually there to let you see how it is to work with us, real life. So I think that setup that we've had for many years where like a group of people is assessing then on a tryout day if somebody's actually fit to do the job is incredibly valuable. Because then you feel really the dynamic in yourself when you're doing the work, and we feel it to see to what extent you're able to do these things. So I think in hiring, you want to get as close to real life in assessing somebody's abilities to deal with the work and the problems that he needs to solve. That has worked well for us. Then secondly, I think what is important with hiring is that you identify, let's say, if somebody has the raw intelligence and capabilities to learn. And I think those are more important than the actual skill set. So it's kind of the attitude and the amplitude of intellect to learn things, because many of the things that we're building have not been built by anybody before. And also how we work is quite different from many other companies. So your ability to learn, adapt, and to innovate is more important than the actual skills that you have. Obviously, this changes more, like skills become, maybe experience become more important at the top of our company, but in general at Vinted, I think that is true. And then there's a lot of talk about, let's say, people always use this word culture, which is like this huge umbrella for many things, actually so undefined. But I think one of the most important parts is that somebody is, let's say, honest and trustworthy about like what he's doing and feels safe to be honest about like what he's doing, how he's doing things, and what's happening. So I think having an environment in which people are not afraid to hide things and speak freely is one of the most important things in culture.
Yeah, that's psychological safety to be able to speak up.
Yeah, exactly. And psychological safety often gets confused with being nice and being pampering. It's absolutely toxic if it becomes that, because I want people to feel safe to say something that is wrong, but I don't want people to feel safe that they can do whatever they want and they're safe to have this job for life. So safe is a very big word as well, but psychological safety is very broad. So I think you need to be very specific with that, is that you feel safe to make mistakes and learn, but like you do feel a certain level of tension, friction, anxiousness that if what we do is not good enough, then that has consequences. Because that is important. And there was a meeting where and it was actually a board meeting where I got very angry. And then I got comments like, if you behave like this, we don't feel safe. I was like, yeah, but you shouldn't feel safe if I get 3 times the same question, because then people are not listening and then you should not feel safe. So I think psychological safety is a very broad word. So I want to be specific about that. I think it's important that you feel safe to make mistakes. You work hard because you don't feel safe that if you don't work hard, things will continue as it is. I think it's the downfall of any company if everybody feels safe, like as if future growth and future prosperity is kind of like given. No, it's not. Like we live in a world where if we don't deliver, somebody else will take it away from us. Like an American company, Chinese company will go and outwork us and outclass us and will give users something that is better than what we have. So we shouldn't feel safe psychologically around that. We should feel anxious about that. We should feel safe that we are in an environment where we can make mistakes, learn, and then work hard to be not outclassed by another team.
Yeah, I see the distinction. Yeah, it makes sense. And I think that's the sort of environment where, ambitious, driven people can really thrive because they want to win, but they're also in a place where they can make mistakes as long as they learn from them. And that there's that kind of environment where you can speak up and have ideas. And,
Yeah,
I think it sounds like a really strong culture.
yeah. So I believe in that. Obviously, we're not perfect in that, but this is what I myself try to do.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing so honestly. I guess linked to that, scaling a culture is really tricky from, a few people in a room to thousands of people across geography. How do you ensure you keep that culture strong? And how do you ensure alignment and shared purpose, when you are distributed? What is the kind of secret to success there?
Yeah, I think on the shared purpose, you should never oversell it. I think there have been many companies who've overshared their purpose, as in, we're gonna democratize this and that, and we're gonna save the world. But then in the end, okay, you're just a taxi company, or you're like renting out rooms. So that's a big disappointment. So I think you should be very honest about what the purpose of the company is. And with Vinted, it's quite simple. We're helping people to sell secondhand goods, and that is quite useful. So people can make some extra money, and it's better than consuming only new goods. So it's kind of useful for society in those ways. And we're excited about that because we think it can have a big impact. So being very simple about what we do and also what we don't. We're not like a charity organization that jumps up to support any good cause in this world, because like we're not. We're like a bunch of people who sell secondhand clothing and know about that. So we have a specific purpose. We stick to that. I think that's important, first of all, to be honest about it. Don't oversell it. About what you do, be excited about it. And I think then about how you scale culture, it is very much, obviously, as a person myself, as a CEO myself, I can speak at, let's say, all hands, and I give, on how I comment on work in public and stuff like that. That sets the tone. But as you become bigger, more and more importantly is how my team behaves, and the team underneath that who manages a lot of people behave. And I think they're having at those levels the right behavior on how we're treating people, how we're focusing people, how we are firing people, how we're hiring people. That is, I think, in the end, what culture is. And much of it is about what do you reward and what do you punish, right? So when are you saying like this is really bad, and like when you say this is amazing, how all these people underneath are doing that within the organization. So I think that is important in scaling, that there is a very similar message from me to 3 levels down, how all these people are taking decisions, like the harder decisions. So the hiring, firing, and decisions on where to allocate capital. I think that is actually the core of it. Like, how do they have a conversation with somebody who is underperforming? How to have a conversation with somebody who's overperforming? How to have a conversation about critiquing on a proposal that's not good enough? And how do they then decide now we don't allocate capital here, but we do allocate it there? I think how your managers, how your team and those layers underneath take these decisions is actually what defines culture and how it scales. So that's, yeah, it's not about how we talk about things, it's actually how we do things.
Do things. Yeah. Right. I really appreciate that. It does sound like a fantastic place to work. So really glad we had a chance to learn a bit more about that. We do need to come on to talk about the latest headlines at Vinted, the launch of Vinted Ventures. So a super exciting time for the business. Can you tell us a bit more about how you decided to build out an investment on, like, what's the thesis behind it? And what are you looking for in potential businesses to invest in?
Yeah. So how this came about is that we think it's even somewhere 2019 or something like that. So it's like 6 years ago. We hired Milda Saiten, and she came from a venture capital firm in Berlin, and she wanted to become a product manager. And then the product team rejected her, and Vidas, our CFO, said like, we had one of the most brilliant people I've met in the last year or so, and the product team rejected her. I'm going to make up a job in my team because we need to hire this person. I'm like, Vidas, like, we're like really cost constrained. He said like, no, but Thomas, we really need to do this. And I know knew Vidas very well. Is one person who is tight on cost. It's Vidas. So I thought, well, you must care a lot for this. So let's do it. And he made her OKR wizard, helping us to set up OKRs and run these processes. Pretty soon after she started, we saw that she was clearly great. And we run into a moment that we needed to, that we had an opportunity that we could buy a company. So we thought, well, obviously Milda should then take the lead there. And from there on, she built out our organization. So we have built out an org with a bunch of people who are constantly assessing which companies we should buy. And we buy companies that are for consolidation, for certain skill sets and functionalities, or to expand our footprint. So that went really well. So she built like an incredible team that was helping not only on M&A, but also on strategical matters. And at a certain point in time, that team consisted of a couple of people who worked in venture capital before. And they looked at our strategy around making secondhand first choice and how can we ensure that we do that in the best possible way. And they said like, look, we have M&A and we have organically building ourselves. But there are certain bets that we would never do with M&A because it's too risky, it's too early, and we're not going to execute on it as well. So it's kind of open. But those are things that could really help to make secondhand first choice in the future. And thus they proposed like, okay, if we start to write small checks to be early into those companies, we can help those companies scale with our expertise or with our network. So then that actually made complete sense. Like we looked at the full spectrum on how can we develop, let's say, the secondhand industry. We're operating and building, we are buying as well, and there's a gap in between. Okay, so then, we have a team who has skills to do this, and they build a plan. And we were convinced about the plan. So we said, okay, let's start small. And we start with a 10 million commitment. You write small tickets and show us that you can make this work. And we'll see if it goes. So we had a very strong leader who hired good people underneath her that had that experience, that proved themselves in M&A, became like this very good team that then wrote a proposal for an opportunity in another direction. And then we built it. So it was, yeah, that's it. So again, you see how this is not somewhere that the board makes a strategic decision or that I have some like fantastic vision. It's like Milda and her team puzzling and seeing an opportunity and then writing a proposal, discussing this with the CFO and with our investors and getting to a point that everybody says like, actually, it makes total sense.
Yeah, I love that. I'd love to hear your thoughts as someone that's seen a lot of talent and probably a lot of founders along the way. Like, what are the green flags that you're looking for in founders that will be pitching for investment from Vinted Ventures? And on the flip side, what are the sorts of red flags that kind of put you off?
Yeah, so it's quite personal, I think. So we have different people in our organization, in my team, that have different strengths, right? And so if I assess somebody, then I mostly look at if this person in detail understands his business. If he really understands, let's say, the fundamental truths, the dynamics behind it, why certain things are working or why certain things are not working, that he can in a very detailed way, analytical way, can explain himself. Because I find that very important. And if it becomes a story that is very subjective, very fuzzy, then to me, that's a red flag, let's say. So I'm measuring it against my own strengths because I'm quite analytical and quite precise on strategic analytical elements. So I would want to see some of that muscle in somebody who is leading and building something. And it doesn't have to be this one person, right? But it's mostly the team who's running it in which you want to see it, because not everybody has to be like that. But we have other people who are looking at the rest of the team. So we're looking at the team. We're not looking at the founder, because the team is a reflection of the guy who's building, or the girl who's building the company. So it's mostly about the team. And then, did this person attract somebody with excellent technical skills? So then somebody from Mindogos' team, our CTO's team, will look into that. Somebody from Allard's team will look at, let's say, how the analytical setup is. Somebody from more marketing background will look at how their marketing is organized. And then you want to see on some of these elements, you want to see excellence. And if not, then that's a red flag in terms of team. So first of all, I'm very interested in the team, not so much specifically the founder, because it's actually the quality of the founder is determined by what kind of team he's able to put on the ground that is executing and that has success. We look at those things, like what is the output of the product, the results of it, the team that's there. And then it can even be that the founder is actually the weakest link that is not necessary in the future. And that's fine. And you can have an honest conversation about that. Obviously, that's with M&A, obviously, right? Because if you look at venture, then the founder needs to be there. He's going to run it. But then still, his team is the best reflection of his own qualities.
That's great. Thank you. We're sadly close to an end, and we've got 2 final wrap-up questions. But before then, I know you see a lot of potential in the re-commerce sector. So we'd love just to hear quickly a bit about that opportunity and where you see the sector going in the years ahead.
I think that over the last, let's say, 2 decades, the e-commerce sector has developed very well. And we've seen companies doing an incredible job, like Mercado Libre, Amazon, but also the Costco's of this world, in making, let's say, new products and any type of product being available for very low prices with high service levels and ease of use to be able to purchase it. So we've built all these infrastructures that are optimized for that process, which is from a business to a consumer. Over the last 9 years, we started to build the first parts of building the infrastructure to enable people to trade peer-to-peer, C2C, so from consumer to consumer. And I think over the next decade, we have to work really hard to build the value chains and the technology to make peer-to-peer transactional services as easy as, let's say, the B2C service that have been built before. And I think that by itself will bring an enormous shift in consumption within society, where we can unlock all the value of things that are not used. And obviously this is unlocked already in like high value products like cars and houses. Like, you don't use a house and throw it away, obviously. Same with a car. But in all kinds of smaller products, whatever it is, this is not the case. And much of it just goes to waste and just lays idle in houses doing nothing. That volume of value that is just laying around and is wasted is huge. And I think that's a huge consumption shift that will bring over the next decade into how we consume. So that's what I see. So that's like the most high level, always true statement you can make. That's not that insightful, but I think is interesting. And what we really are focused on is to then really build these rails for C2C commerce. And I think that's what we're mostly focused on right now, to do all the hard stuff that is needed to do that. Whether that's shipping, payments, trust and safety, security, whatever it is, all the difficulty around liquidity, there's a lot to do. And I think if we do that well, then this type of service can become like completely obvious. And what I mean with that is that if you look at, for example, how you consider electricity out of a socket or water out of the tap, it's like completely obvious. Everybody's using it. It's kind of this network you can depend on. It's always there. It's always working. And I would love that we build, let's say, the rails to globally enable people to transact just so easily C2C, that it's like this thing you can always depend on as much as a utility as water and electricity is, right?
Yeah, sounds incredible. Well, we wish you nothing but the best of luck with making that a reality. With Sally and then Thomas, I've got 2 final very quick wrap-up questions. I've loved this conversation, but I'm sure our audience would love to know. This is 40-minute mentor. So if you could be mentored by anyone, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
Yeah, I knew this question was coming and I didn't really have a good answer to it. Look, I think there are so many, in general, I like biographies. So I read biographies time to time. And I think there are always very cool lessons in what many people did. A biography that I really liked was the one of Rockefeller, where you really see how he goes into logistics infrastructure to build something much bigger than what anybody else can build, which was non-obvious then, but very cool. Also, the Henry Ford story is incredible. So I think those kind of stories are amazing. So I think those kind of people would be very cool to meet. But it's actually, I don't really have this kind of thing that I look up at to these big names that I think I learned so much from them. I find the most inspiration and learning from actually the people around me. So the people in my team and the people in the teams underneath me in the company, where I think actually it is wrong to kind of look at big business leaders and expect that there will be the biggest lessons because these are the people I've built so much. I think much of the reflection that you can have and can learn from is actually from people who are next to you, underneath you, in your company, who are willing to give you honest reflection on yourself, but also on what's happening in the world. Because it's not the arrived leaders that has built something that probably are going to have the insights about the next thing that is going to happen. Because the guy who invented the radio didn't invent the television, and the guy who invented television didn't invent the internet, right? So I find just a lot of learning and inspiration from the people, younger people, and the people around me. I think if you look for mentorship, don't go for the big successful people. Go for smart, sharp people that are around you and in other places.
Yeah, I love that. That's a really refreshing way to look at it. Thank you. And finally, Thomas, what's the last piece of career advice that you would like to leave our listeners with today?
I think my advice, what works for me is that you help other people around you. I was quickly excited to help other people solve problems. That helped me a lot. So based on my own small experience, that worked out for me. So just be nice, help others out, and it will work out for you as well.
It's a wonderful mantra to finish a wonderful conversation. Thomas, thank you so much for joining us on 40 Minute Mentor. Loved what you built at Vinted and really excited for the years ahead and all you can achieve. So thank you for sharing your story today.
Thank you very much, James. Have a nice day.
Cheers, Thomas.
Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. I really hope that you found it useful and inspiring. If we have left any questions unanswered, or if you have any feedback or guest recommendations for future series, then please make sure you get in touch on info@jbmc.co.uk. I often get asked by listeners how you can help us spread the word about 40 Minute Mentor. There are two simple ways you can help. Firstly, share this episode on your preferred social media platform, and LinkedIn is probably where I'm most likely to see it. And you can also leave us a review on either Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Every share on social media and review left on the podcast platforms really helps us to get 40 Minute Mentor in front of new audiences and share the power of mentorship even further. Thank you so much for your ongoing support, and I look forward to seeing you again next Wednesday for even more pocket-sized mentorship.